So I think next step is I have a demo that I can show, which shows also executing workflows through the API, and then finally also integrating that into a real life example app based on the API calls. So we have a repository available, which is available on our GitHub, which is Paradym Example University Courses. And this is an example application where we show integration with the Paradym API. It is a Next.js React app, if you're familiar with that. And it has some code to integrate with our API. So we have some actions to verify course credentials, and that integrates with our API. And it builds on top of a certain set of workflows. So let's set this up here first in Paradym, and then we'll execute it to the API, and then later I'll show how to integrate it with this example application. So to start off, we'll register the course credential template. And one of the nice things about workflows in this case is that, for example, we could also add these workflows to our GitHub repository and know, like, all right, how do I get to the state where I was? So let's create a new one, and I'll create a new workflow. And what this does is basically the same as the first register template, but here we already defined like the specific fields that we need. So we have a course certificate, we have a version and attribute names. The only thing that's configurable is the network, so we can easily switch between running this in development or production. So I'll execute this. So now again, I'll do the testnet. And it will create these templates. So while that is running, I'll go to the next step, which is a way to issue a course certificate. I can copy this workflow as well. And I'll create a new workflow, issue course certificate. And I can also paste that in here. And this takes in a few fields, like the student number, the name, and the course that was completed. And it will first create a connection, and then it will issue a credential. We still need to update it with our created credential definition ID. So I'll quickly go to the register course credential, and I'll extract the created credential definition here, so we can then use that. Let's see. All right. Issue course certificate. I'll paste it in here, and then we can save and publish it. So this is now also ready to execute, and I could execute it again through UI, but I now want to show you how you can integrate with our API. So if you go to the settings tab, there's a few pages, things available in the settings, and one of them is the API key. API keys allow you to call our API, and you can manage them here. And I'll create an API key. And once it's created, I'll get an API key. Don't worry, I'm gonna revoke this afterwards. So, once I've created the API key, I can use this to call the API. So to get documentation on the API, we have api.paradym.id. And in here, we have Swagger documentation on how you can call our API. Currently, there's only 2 endpoints, and it's very simple. You build your workflow in the online editor, and once you've published it, you can execute it through the API, or you can get the status for a workflow execution through the API. There's also more documentation on how you can execute a workflow in our documentation. There you can see like how it works to create an API key, and how you can trigger an execution using the API with, for example, an example curl request. So now that I have my API key, I'll go to Postman, and in here I have prepared some executions. So this one is ready to call the workflow. First thing I need to do is I need to set my access token, so I can call the Paradym API. And next thing I need to do is I need to know which workflow I want to call to issue this course certificate. I can find the ID of a workflow in the execution step. So if I go to the execution step, I have an ID here, and this is the ID of my workflow. So once I copy that, I can put it in here. Now I have everything ready to issue a course certificate, which say Timo Glastra has completed Introduction to TypeScript with my student number. So I'll execute this now. It will call our API. And let's also open up the Paradym wallet again. And you can see the workflow has been created. And in the background, it has started running. So if I fetch the latest status, you can see it has changed to waiting for a trigger, which is the same as the on hold state. And we now have the invitation URL. I created a thing that calls a Google API to quickly generate a QR code. But again, normally you would integrate this to your application UI. So we have the QR code. I can scan this. And then it will, in the background, it will continue with running the workflow again. So now I have, I forgot to disable the other workflow. So now I also get this credential offer from Paradym, but I also got this course certificate. So I get this course certificate with Introduction to TypeScript, and then I'll accept it. And I also have this course certificate in my wallet now. So if we go back to the UI again, and I'm quickly going to disable this workflow because I don't want to issue a credential anytime a connection is made anymore. The final thing we have to do to set up is the verification. So in here, I have another example workflow, which is a one to verify a course certificate. And in the input, I can say which course I want to verify, and then it will create a connection. It will request a presentation of that course from the wallet. And finally, we'll validate the return value to make sure that the course matches the course that we want to complete. So I can't just provide any course. I need to have completed a specific course. So let's copy this. Let's save it. Verify. And paste it again here. So with this workflow, we need to also update the credential definition ID that we created to make sure we verify that the credential was actually issued by an anchor we trust. Currently, we are both the issuer and the verifier. In other scenarios, it may be that someone else created a credential definition and issues the credential, and you just allow it to be verified. And if there's multiple issuers, for example, in an ecosystem, you can just provide multiple restrictions. And this means that any of these credential definition IDs is valid to satisfy this request. So if you have a list of universities, then you could accept them all in a request. For now, we just accept this one credential definition ID. So let's publish it. And the same thing as with the previous one, we're going to note down the execution ID so we can execute it in here. I also prepared this one, which calls an execution and update the workflow ID. Now, when I execute this, it will create a proof request that we can use to verify that I have completed the introduction to TypeScript. If I get the execution, We have another invitation URL, and based on that, I can again create a QR code. Let's scan this again with my Paradym wallet. It will parse the invitation, and it should receive a proof request for the execution of for the oops. Let's see if something went wrong here. So we have the invitation URL. Let's try that one more time.
I think you are missing the L at the end.
Yeah, I don't think you copied the whole thing.
Where? In which
The
thing?
invitation URL.
Yeah.
Ah.
This was a test to see if we were all paying attention and we all passed.
Okay, no.
Oh, you missed way more than the L.
yeah. But I take it from from here, and this automatically generates it based on the. So it should.
Yeah.
Okay, let me try one more time. Otherwise, I maybe made a mistake in my workflow. Yeah. So now it's still running the. I removed the one workflow. That's it. But now in my wallet, I have a course credential request. And when I open that, it shows that it wants to know the course that you've enrolled in. I can accept the data to be shared. And if that's shared, then if I get the execution again from Paradym, it should have in the, go to the overview. Yeah, so it has created the presentation exchange, and that has been sent to the wallet. Let me now finally remove this one so I don't get the same credential every time. So the last thing we can do is we can now integrate these workflows that we have here. We can start integrating them into an actual application. So Jan prepared a repo that the repo I just showed you here for the example. And you can run it and you will get this UI where you can get courses, enroll in them, and complete them. So one thing, you can just clone it, and there's a few steps you need to complete, which are explained here. So like registering your credential information, which we did, and creating the other workflows, creating your Paradym API key, which we also did, and now we're ready to set the environment variables. So in here, we have the .env.example, and we can copy that .env.example, and then in the .env, we can update the values for our application. So we created our Paradym API key, which I'll paste here, and we need to provide the workflow IDs. So we have an issue course certificate, which we already copied from the dashboard for API execution. And we have a verify course certificate, which you can also copy here. So with this configured and our workflows configured in Paradym, we can now run the application. And I'm going to run it in dev mode for now. So it should be running. And if I now go back to my browser and go to my local host, I have my local web app running. So in this case, I'm Tom Lancer. I'm a developer that works at Animo, and I'm already signed in to my university overview page where I can see like which courses I'm enrolled in. And as it states now, I have a certificate that's ready to be retrieved for introduction to JavaScript. And So we can first start by completing that workflow. So I have already completed this course, and I can claim a certificate to get that into my wallet to prove it later on. This will now start in the background a workflow execution, and we can again scan the QR code to create a connection between Paradym and the wallet. And once a connection has been completed, I'll get my credential, Introduction to JavaScript, which is issued to Tom. I can accept this in my wallet. And once it's accepted, the certificate issuance is completed. So in the background, this uses a workflow to issue this credential, which we also manually executed through the API before. So I have now completed this one. I have my credential, and I can look for other courses that I can enroll in. Now that I know JavaScript, I would also like to know more about TypeScript. And as you can see, to enroll in the TypeScript course, I need to have completed the Introduction to JavaScript. And I'm going to enroll here, and it will again start a new workflow to request a proof of my credential. So scanner again. So again, we will create a connection, and we will get a request from Paradym to share a course certificate. I'll accept it. It will be shared. And once it has shared, we get an error because unfortunately our credential did not match the required one for this course. We don't support selection in the wallet yet, which will be added in the next few weeks. But that means it will pick the first one. And because I have multiple course certificates, it actually picked this one. But if I were to have one credential in my wallet, this flow would have succeeded. But that does, like if we go to the workflow now, to the verify course certificate and executions, you can see this one failed. And why did it fail? Because the JSON schema validation failed. Because we required the credential to be equal to the Introduction to JavaScript, but the actual value that was presented in the credential itself was Introduction to TypeScript, and that's not what we want. So based on this, like the workflow will fail and say like, hey, I expected this credential, but yeah, you provided this one. So based on that, we now have this fully end-to-end application that in the background uses Paradym to handle the credential workflows, issue credentials, and verify them. There's one last thing I want to show, which we won't go into very in depth today, but that is like, how would you integrate with Paradym and get live updates? And that's by using webhooks. Webhooks allow you to get notified of changes, and you can expose an endpoint in your server where you can receive webhooks of updates that are happening. So I can, a popular site to get to the test webhooks is webhook.site, which will just give you a unique URL where you can send webhooks to. Normally you would expose this on your own website, of course. And I can also create a webhook now, live building session. I paste in the webhook URL, I create it, and I get a secret that is used for verifying webhooks, so you know Paradym actually sent it. But yeah, today I won't use it, but when you really do this in a production scenario, you should verify that the webhooks sent by Paradym are signed using this signature, which allows you to verify that, yeah, no one else is calling your API endpoints.
Will you also start supporting authentication on the webhooks?
Authentication in which form?
could be multiple forms, of course, but basically having a webhook which requires authentication, so that you would fill out some authentication details in here, which would allow only an authenticated call to the webhook.
Yeah, that is a possibility. Like if you have specific needs, we can add that. For now, this is a very, yeah, it's a simple way to expose an endpoint and also allow the case to verify that the webhook was actually authorized and sent by Paradym and not somebody else. But yeah, we could implement other mechanisms if those are preferred over this one.
Right.
Yeah, we chose this one because it's a very common practice for online services to use a like a signature on the HTTP payload.
Yeah, true. But in enterprise systems, you also typically encounter authentication on webhooks as well. So yeah, that's where my question comes from.
Yeah, no, that's definitely possible. So if we, for example, were now to issue a credential again, so let's say I have mastering Rust programming, I can complete a course. Normally, it wouldn't be this easy to complete a course, but today it is. I can claim this certificate, and then it will again start executing a workflow, which I can then scan using the Paradym wallet. And what we can see happening now, if I go to the webhook.site, you can see I have received notifications here that a workflow execution has started. You can see more are popping in here, which says like it's now waiting for a trigger or as an action executed. And once I accept it, more will come in. And this allows you to react to changes in your workflow execution, which especially for long running workflows where the user, like let's say you send a user an email and he may respond in a few days, then whenever something changes in the execution of a workflow, you can react to it and you can know like my workflow execution is now completed or this action is now ready. So we can now see like the issue credential action has been executed.